Welcome, brave souls, to Angelical Balance, where true horror stories pierce the veil between worlds. I'm your host, and tonight we're traveling down 5 of America's most terrifying roads, where something dark waits in the darkness. These aren't just stories, these are real encounters from real people who barely made it home to tell the tale. Before we begin, smash that like button if you're ready to be spooked. Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from, and have you ever experienced something unexplainable on the road? Got your own creepy road trip story? Email it to us. The address is in the description below. Subscribe for terrifying tales every week, grab your headphones, lock your doors, and let's find the balance between fear and fascination. The road is calling. Are you ready? Let's dive into the darkness.
Story 1 comes from Jennifer Walsh. Interstate 80, Nebraska. I need to write this down while the memories are still fresh, even though part of me wants to forget everything that happened on that God-forsaken stretch of highway. It's been 2 weeks since my road trip across America turned into a nightmare, and I still can't drive at night without my hands shaking on the wheel. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I'm a freelance photographer from Portland, Oregon. Last month, I decided to drive cross-country to attend my sister's wedding in Philadelphia. I know what you're thinking, why not just fly? Well, I'd been feeling stuck in my life, uninspired in my work, and I thought a solo road trip would give me time to clear my head and maybe capture some interesting shots along the way. I had 2 weeks to make the drive, so I planned to take my time, stop at roadside attractions, and really experience the heartland of America. The first few days were exactly what I needed. I drove through the Columbia River Gorge, spent a night in Boise, explored the craters of the moon in Idaho. By the time I hit Wyoming, I was feeling more alive than I had in months. My camera roll was filling up with sunrise shots over empty highways, abandoned gas stations, and the kind of wide-open spaces that make you feel wonderfully insignificant. Then I hit Nebraska. I'd been driving for about 10 hours when the sun started setting somewhere west of North Platte. I should have stopped for the night, found a motel, gotten a decent meal and some rest. But I was making good time, and according to my GPS, I was only about 4 hours from Lincoln, where I'd planned to spend the next day. The highway was straight and empty. My playlist was keeping me energized, and I figured I could push through. That was my first mistake. By 9 p.m., I was the only car on Interstate 80. The darkness out here wasn't like darkness in the city. It was absolute, pressing against my windows like something solid. My headlights carved a small tunnel through the black, and beyond that, there was nothing. No buildings, no lights, just endless prairie stretching out on both sides of the highway. I'd been driving in this void for about 20 minutes when I first saw the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first I was relieved. There's something unsettling about being completely alone on a highway in the middle of nowhere, and seeing another vehicle made me feel less isolated. The car behind me was maintaining a steady distance, maybe a quarter-mile back. I couldn't make out what kind of vehicle it was, just 2 white headlights and the suggestion of a dark shape between them. Then I noticed something odd. The car wasn't getting any closer, but it wasn't falling behind either. It was matching my speed exactly. When I slowed down to 60, it slowed down. When I sped up to 75, it sped up. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the driver was just using me as a pace car, following my taillights to stay alert on this monotonous stretch of highway. But then a second car appeared behind the first one. This one pulled into the left lane, but instead of passing the first car, it settled in right beside it. Now there were 4 headlights in my rearview mirror, 2 pairs side by side, maintaining that exact distance behind me. They moved in perfect synchronization, like they were connected by an invisible rod. My stomach tightened. This was weird. This was definitely weird. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my Honda up to 85. The two cars behind me accelerated smoothly to match my speed, never varying the distance between us. I could see now that they appeared to be identical, same size, same headlight configuration, though the darkness made it impossible to identify the make or model. Then a third car appeared, pulling up on the right side of the two-car formation. 3 vehicles now, moving in perfect unison a quarter-mile behind me. Okay, what the hell? I muttered, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. I looked for an exit, anything that would get me off this highway and around other people. But according to the signs I'd just passed, the next exit wasn't for another 37 miles. I grabbed my phone from the cup holder, thinking I'd call 911, or at least my sister, someone who could talk me down from what was rapidly becoming a panic attack. No signal. Of course, there was no signal. I was in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, and apparently the universe had decided tonight was the night to completely fuck with me. 4th car, left lane, completing a formation that was now 2 rows of 2, all maintaining that precise distance behind me, all moving in perfect coordination. I slammed on my brakes. It was a stupid thing to do at 85 miles an hour on a dark highway, but I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. I needed to break whatever pattern this was, needed to force these cars to either pass me or reveal what they wanted. My Honda decelerated rapidly, tires squealing slightly, and I watched the rearview mirror with my heart in my throat. The 4 cars behind me braked in perfect unison. They slowed at the exact same rate I did, maintaining that quarter-mile distance like it was locked in by some invisible tether.
When I came to a complete stop in the middle of the highway, they stopped too, 4 sets of headlights glowing in the darkness behind me. For about 30 seconds, we all just sat there, me in my Honda, them in their formation. The only sound was my ragged breathing and the tick-tick-tick of my hazard lights, which I'd automatically hit when I stopped. Then, slowly, all 4 cars turned off their headlights simultaneously. The darkness that swallowed the highway was so complete that I couldn't see anything in my rearview mirror. I couldn't tell if the cars were still there, couldn't see shapes or outlines, nothing. It was like they'd simply vanished into the void. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to floor the accelerator and get the hell out of there. But something kept me frozen in my seat, hands locked on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror where 4 cars had been seconds ago. Then the headlights came back on, but they weren't a quarter-mile away anymore. They were maybe 100 feet behind me, and the formation had changed. The 4 cars had spread out, taking up both lanes and both shoulders, creating a wall of vehicles across the entire highway. And they were rolling forward, slowly, deliberately, like wolves closing in on cornered prey. I didn't think, I just reacted. My foot slammed down on the accelerator and my Honda leaped forward, engine roaring as I pushed it as hard as it would go. 90 miles an hour, 95, 100. The engine was screaming, my whole car was shaking, and I was whispering, "Please, please, please," over and over like a prayer. The 4 cars behind me accelerated too, but this time they didn't match my speed, they exceeded it. I watched in horror as the wall of headlights grew larger in my mirror, closing the distance between us with terrifying speed. They had to be doing over 120, maybe more, and there was something impossibly smooth about the way they moved, no wobbling or weaving, despite the insane velocity. A 5th car appeared out of nowhere in front of me. I saw its taillights first, red dots in the darkness that materialized so suddenly I almost didn't react in time. I swerved into the left lane, heart hammering, horn blaring, and as I passed the car I caught a glimpse of it in my headlights. A dark sedan with tinted windows and no license plate. It was rolling slowly down the highway, maybe 30 miles an hour, impossibly slow for an interstate. As soon as I passed it, the car accelerated and fell into formation with the four behind me. 5 cars now, all chasing me down this empty highway in the middle of the Nebraska night. I was sobbing now, barely able to see the road through my tears, my speedometer hovering around 105. My Honda wasn't built for this kind of speed, and I could feel the whole car struggling, the steering getting loose and unpredictable. But I couldn't slow down. The 5 cars behind me were maybe 50 feet back now, their headlights so bright in my mirrors that my whole car was flooded with white light. That's when I saw the exit sign. Ogallala, 2 miles. 2 miles. I just had to survive 2 more miles and I could get off this highway, find a gas station or a police station or anywhere with people and lights. I pushed my Honda even harder, coaxing every last bit of speed from the engine, and started counting down the 1/10 of a mile markers that flashed past in my headlights. 1.8 miles, 1.6 miles, 1.4 miles. The cars behind me suddenly turned off their headlights again, all 5 of them simultaneously, plunging the highway behind me into darkness. But this time, I could hear them. Even over the roar of my own engine and the wind screaming past my windows, I could hear the throaty rumble of 5 powerful engines, much larger than whatever my Honda had under the hood. 1.2 miles, 1 mile. The exit ramp appeared in my headlights, and I took it so fast that my tires screamed and my car tilted sickeningly to the right. I'm amazed I didn't flip. The ramp curved up and away from the interstate, and at the top there was a stop sign, and beyond it blessed salvation, a truck stop, lit up like a Christmas tree, with at least a dozen big rigs parked in the lot and people moving around under the fluorescent lights. I didn't bother to stop at the stop sign. I gunned it straight into the truck stop parking lot and slammed on my brakes next to the main building, my car skidding into a crooked parking space. Then I just sat there, shaking, gulping air, unable to make my hands release their death grip on the steering wheel. It took me a full minute to work up the courage to look back at the exit ramp. There was nothing there. No cars, no headlights, no sign that anything had been following me at all. The interstate below was dark and empty, just like it had been when this whole nightmare started. I stumbled into the truck stop on legs that barely worked, and the bored teenager behind the counter took one look at me and asked if I was okay. I must have looked like hell, crying, shaking, probably white as a ghost. I asked if she'd seen any cars pull off at the exit behind me, maybe 5 dark sedans. She said she'd been watching the parking lot on the security monitors for the last 20 minutes, and mine was the first car to pull in since the dinner rush. I bought a coffee I couldn't drink and sat in the truck stop until sunrise, surrounded by tired truckers and the smell of diesel fuel and burnt coffee. Every time a car pulled into the parking lot, I flinched. When the sun finally came up, I got back on the interstate and drove straight to Lincoln without stopping. I checked my mirrors obsessively every 30 seconds, but the 5 cars never reappeared.
That was 2 weeks ago. I made it to my sister's wedding, though I arrived a day late and probably looked like I'd been through a war. When people asked about my road trip, I just said it was fine, uneventful. How do you explain something like that? How do you tell someone that you were hunted on an empty highway by cars that moved in impossible synchronization, that appeared and disappeared like ghosts? I've spent hours trying to rationalize what happened. Maybe it was some kind of elaborate prank, or a gang initiation ritual, or just some locals having fun with a lone driver on an empty highway. But none of those explanations account for the way those cars moved. The perfect coordination, the impossible acceleration, the way they vanished when I reached the exit. I drove back to Portland last week. Flew, actually. I sold my Honda to a used car dealership in Philadelphia and bought a plane ticket home. I told my sister I was too tired for another cross-country drive, but the truth is, I'm terrified of what might be waiting out there on those dark highways, matching my speed in the rearview mirror. The worst part? Last night, I couldn't sleep, so I did something stupid. I searched online for Interstate 80 Nebraska, strange cars, and convoy following driver, I-80. I found a thread on a paranormal forum from 3 years ago. A truck driver reported being followed by 4 identical cars on the same stretch of highway. He managed to outrun them by calling ahead to some trucker friends who created a blockade at an exit. He said he looked back after getting to safety, and the cars were just gone, like they'd evaporated. There were 2 other reports on that thread, both from the same area of I-80, both describing the same thing: multiple vehicles moving in formation, matching speed, getting closer. One driver said the cars followed him for over an hour before he found an exit. Another said she counted 7 cars before she crashed trying to evade them. She survived, but when the police arrived, there was no sign of any other vehicles. The thread ended with a warning. If you see the convoy on I-80, don't stop. Don't slow down. Get off the highway as fast as you can and don't look back. I wish I'd seen that thread before I made my trip. I don't know what those cars were. I don't know who was driving them or if anyone was driving them at all. But I know what I saw. And I know I barely escaped something terrible on that stretch of highway. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I imagine what would have happened if there hadn't been an exit for another 10 miles, or if my car had broken down, or if those 5 cars had caught up to me before I reached the truck stop. I imagine those dark sedans surrounding my Honda, their headlights blazing, and absolutely no one behind the wheels. If you're planning a road trip across America, do yourself a favor. Avoid Interstate 80 through Nebraska. And if you're driving at night and see headlights behind you matching your speed a little too perfectly, get off the highway. Don't try to outrun them. Don't try to make sense of it. Just get somewhere with lights and people and wait for the sun to come up. Because whatever the midnight convoy is, whatever it wants, I don't think anyone who gets caught by it ever gets to tell their story. I'm one of the lucky ones.
Story 2 comes from Amanda Porter, Dalton Highway, Alaska. I'm writing this from a hospital bed in Fairbanks, Alaska, where I've been recovering for the past 3 weeks. The doctors say I'm lucky to be alive, that I shouldn't have survived 3 days exposed to sub-zero temperatures with the injuries I sustained. They keep asking me what happened, how I ended up wandering along the Dalton Highway in the middle of an Arctic winter with no memory of where my truck went or what caused the lacerations on my arms and back.
I remember everything. I just can't tell them the truth because they'll think I'm crazy. Hell, I think I'm crazy, and I was there. My name is Amanda Porter, and until 3 years ago, I was a long-haul trucker specializing in ice road deliveries. It's dangerous work, driving massive rigs over frozen roads in some of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth, but it pays extremely well, and I've always been good at it. In my 7 years doing ice road runs, I'd never had a serious accident, never missed a delivery, never turned down a job because the conditions were too rough. That perfect record ended on the Dalton Highway in January of 2022, also known as the Haul Road. It's a 414-mile stretch of gravel and ice that runs from Living Good, just north of Fairbanks, all the way up to Dead Horse on the Arctic Ocean. It's one of the most dangerous roads in the world, isolated, mostly unpaved, subject to whiteout conditions and temperatures that can drop to 60 below zero. In winter, the sun barely rises, and you're driving through near constant darkness, broken only by your headlights and the occasional truck stop. But the money is incredible. A single run from Fairbanks to Dead Horse in winter can pay more than most people make in 2 months. So when my dispatcher called in early January 2022 and offered me a rush delivery, drilling equipment that needed to get to Dead Horse within 48 hours, I said yes without hesitation. I should have asked more questions, like why it was a rush, like why the previous driver had refused to take the load, like why my dispatcher sounded relieved when I accepted the job, as if he'd been expecting me to turn it down. I picked up the load in Fairbanks on a Thursday afternoon. The weather forecast wasn't great. A storm system moving in from the west, temperatures dropping to -30, possible whiteout conditions north of the Yukon River, but nothing I hadn't handled before. I loaded up on supplies, checked my truck thoroughly, and hit the road around 4 p.m., just as the brief hours of twilight that pass for daylight in December, Alaska, were fading. The first 100 miles were routine. I passed through Living Good, the last real town before the road becomes truly remote, and continued north through the boreal forest. My CB radio crackled occasionally with chatter from other truckers heading south, warning about icy patches and visibility issues. The temperature gauge on my dashboard read -25 and dropping. Around midnight, I reached the Yukon River crossing. There's a small truck stop there. Just a building with a cafe, some fuel pumps, and a few parking spaces for drivers who need to rest. I pulled in to fuel up and grab some coffee, even though I wasn't particularly tired yet. On the Dalton Highway in winter, you take every opportunity to refuel and resupply, because you never know when the next chance will come. The truck stop was nearly empty, just my rig and one other truck parked at the far end of the lot, its engine idling to keep from freezing. Inside the building, the cafe was dimly lit and smelled like burnt coffee and diesel fuel. An older native Alaskan man stood behind the counter, and when I walked in, he looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not unwelcoming exactly, but wary. He asked, "Coffee?" I said, "Please, large, black." He poured it without comment and slid the cup across the counter. I paid and was turning to leave when he spoke again. "You heading north?" "Yeah, Dead Horse. Should be there by tomorrow if the weather holds." He was quiet for a moment, studying me with dark eyes that seemed to see more than I was comfortable with. "You hear about the missing trucks?" "What missing trucks?" 3 trucks in the last 2 months, all heading north to Dead Horse, all disappeared somewhere between here and Cold Foot. They find the trucks eventually, usually a few days later, but the drivers—" He shook his head. "Gone. Just gone. No footprints leading away, no sign of where they went." I'd heard vague rumors about disappearances on the Dalton Highway, but that wasn't unusual. It's a dangerous road, and drivers sometimes get disoriented in whiteout conditions, abandon their vehicles, and freeze to death before they can be found. "That's terrible," I said, "but it happens out here sometimes." "Not like this." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "The trucks they find, they're not crashed or stuck. They're just stopped in the middle of the road, engines still running, driver's door open, like someone got out to check something and just vanished. And the trucks themselves, they're not right." "What do you mean, not right?"
The electronics are fried. Radios don't work. GPS is scrambled. Even the engine computers are corrupted with data that doesn't make sense. And inside the cabs? He hesitated. The steering wheels are covered in ice. Thick ice, like they'd been sitting in a freezer for weeks, even though the heaters were running the whole time. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Are they telling drivers to avoid the route? Can't avoid it if you need to get to Dead Horse, but they're advising people not to drive alone at night. The convoy up with other trucks when possible. You got anyone you're traveling with? No, it's just me. He looked at me for a long moment, then reached under the counter and pulled out something wrapped in worn leather. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing what looked like a carved bone pendant on a leather cord. Strange symbols were etched into the bone, and it had been stained dark with age or smoke. "My grandmother made this," he said quietly. "It's protection against the things that walk in the long dark, the spirits that come down from the Brooks Range when the sun doesn't rise, looking for warmth, looking for life to steal. You take this with you." I wanted to refuse. I'm not a superstitious person, and the idea of needing spiritual protection on a trucking run seemed absurd. But something in his eyes stopped me. He genuinely believed what he was saying, and after 7 years of ice road driving, I'd learned to respect the beliefs of the people who lived in these extreme places. They knew things that outsiders didn't. "Thank you," I said, taking the pendant and slipping it over my head. It was surprisingly heavy and cold against my chest, even through my thermal layers. "Drive fast. Don't stop unless you absolutely have to. And if you see lights that don't make sense, lights that move wrong or come from the wrong direction, you keep driving. Don't investigate, don't slow down, just go. Understand?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I did understand, but I thanked him again and headed back to my truck, the pendant bouncing against my sternum with each step. The next section of the Dalton Highway took me higher into the mountains, through Finger Mountain and into the Brooks Range. The terrain became more dramatic. Steep grades, hairpin turns, sheer drops on one side, with no guardrails. The darkness was absolute beyond my headlights, and the temperature had dropped to -35. Ice fog was forming in the valleys, reducing visibility to near zero in places. I'd been driving for about 2 hours past the Yukon River when my CB radio squawked to life. "Breaker, breaker, this is northbound at mile marker 195. Anyone out there?" I grabbed the mic. "This is northbound hauler at mile marker 208. Go ahead." Oh, thank God. The voice was male, young, and edged with something that sounded like panic. "Listen, I'm stuck here. My truck just died. Engine won't turn over, radio's all static, and my cell phone is completely dead. Can you stop when you get to me? I need help." Every instinct I'd developed over 7 years of ice road driving was screaming at me that something was wrong. Trucks don't just die on the Dalton Highway. They're maintained too well,
checked too thoroughly before every run, and having the engine, radio, and phone all fail simultaneously. That wasn't mechanical failure. That was something else. "What's your name?" I asked. Static filled the line for several seconds. Then, "My name? My name is Amanda Porter." My blood turned to ice. That was my name. He just said my name. "Say again?" I managed to get out. "Amanda Porter. That's who I am. That's who you are. That's who we all are up here. We're all Amanda Porter now. We're all stuck at mile marker 195, and we need you to stop. We need you to help us. We need you to join us. Amanda Porter. Amanda Porter. Amanda Porter." I dropped the mic like it had burned me. The radio continued to crackle, and I could hear voices now, multiple voices, all speaking in different tones and cadences, but all saying the same thing. "Amanda Porter. Mile marker 195. Stop and help us. Join us. Stay with us. Amanda Porter. Amanda Porter. Amanda Porter." I reached over and shut off the CB radio with a shaking hand. Silence filled the cab, broken only by the rumble of my engine and the hiss of my tires on the ice-packed road. The pendant the old man had given me felt warm now against my chest, almost hot, like it was reacting to something in the air around me. Mile marker 195 was coming up fast. I could see it in my headlights, a reflective green sign on the right side of the road, marking the distance from Fairbanks. And just beyond it, I could see something else. A truck, stopped in the middle of the road, exactly as the old man had described. Driver's door hanging open, interior lights on, engine running. I could see the exhaust vapor rising into the frigid air, but no sign of the driver.
I should have gone around it, should have pulled into the oncoming lane and kept driving. But something made me slow down as I approached. Professional instinct, maybe, or morbid curiosity. I needed to see. As my headlights swept across the abandoned truck, I saw that the windshield was completely frozen over on the inside, just like the old man had said. Thick ice coating the glass, despite the fact that the engine was running and the heater must have been on. And the driver's seat. There was something in the driver's seat. Not a person, but a shape. It looked almost like a person made of ice, translucent and crystalline, sitting frozen in the exact position a driver would sit. Its hands were on the steering wheel, its head turned slightly toward the passenger side, as if it had been looking at something before it froze. I pressed on the accelerator, my truck picking up speed as I pulled around the abandoned vehicle. As I passed it, I glanced in my side mirror and saw the ice figure's head turn to watch me go. Smoothly, impossibly, the frozen head rotated to track my movement. Then more trucks appeared ahead of me. They materialized out of the darkness like ghosts, one after another, all stopped in the middle of the road with their doors open and their interiors lit. 5 trucks, 7, 10, stretching ahead as far as my headlights could reach, a convoy of abandoned vehicles with frozen figures sitting in the driver's seats. I swerved between them, my heart hammering, adrenaline flooding my system. Each truck I passed had the same frozen driver, and each frozen head turned to watch me go by. Some of them had their mouths open, as if they had been screaming when the ice took them. Others had their hands reaching toward the passenger side, grasping for something that wasn't there. Then I saw the lights. They appeared in the darkness to my left, up in the mountains above the road. Not the steady lights of buildings or vehicles, but moving lights, dancing lights, shifting between blue and green and white like aurora borealis, but wrong somehow. Too low, too concentrated, too purposeful in their movement. The lights began to descend toward the road, flowing down the mountainside like luminescent liquid. And as they got closer, I could see shapes within them. Tall, impossibly thin shapes that moved with a fluid grace that was nothing like human locomotion. They were gliding, or floating, or moving in some way that my brain couldn't properly process.
I pushed my truck faster, the engine roaring, the cab shaking from the speed and the rough road surface. The temperature inside the cab was dropping rapidly, despite the heater running full blast. I could see my breath now, white clouds forming with each exhalation. Frost was forming on the inside of my windshield, growing in crystalline patterns that spread across the glass like living things. The pendant around my neck was burning hot now, almost painful against my skin, but I didn't take it off. Some primal part of me understood that it was the only thing keeping whatever was out there from getting inside my truck. More of those glowing shapes appeared ahead of me, standing on the road itself, blocking my path. I couldn't tell if they were solid, or if driving through them would destroy my truck, or if they'd simply pass through like smoke. But I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't stop. Stopping meant freezing. Stopping meant becoming another ice figure in another abandoned truck, another missing driver that would never be found. I aimed for a gap between two of the shapes and floored the accelerator. The impact, when it came, wasn't physical. It was more like driving through a wall of absolute cold, a cold so intense it burned. Every window in my cab shattered simultaneously, glass exploding inward in a shower of frozen shards. The steering wheel went rigid under my hands, frozen solid in an instant. The dashboard lights died, plunging me into darkness, broken only by the otherworldly glow of those shapes surrounding my truck. But I was still moving. My truck's momentum was carrying me forward even though I couldn't steer, couldn't see properly, couldn't feel my hands anymore because they were frozen to the wheel. I could hear things outside the truck now, not sounds exactly, but vibrations that bypassed my ears and resonated directly in my skull. Voices without words, singing without melody, a chorus of frozen things calling me to stop, to rest, to sleep in the cold and never wake up. My pendant around my neck flared with heat so intense I screamed. The leather cord burned through and the pendant fell, landing on my lap and searing through my insulated pants to the skin beneath. But that pain, that real, physical, warm pain, broke through the cold's hold on me. I yanked my hands free from the frozen steering wheel, leaving skin behind, and grabbed the pendant with both hands despite the agony it caused. The heat radiating from it was like holding a piece of the sun, but I held on, held tight, and I screamed words I didn't know in a language I'd never learned. The shapes around my truck recoiled, the oppressive cold lessened fractionally, and my truck, still rolling forward on momentum alone, broke free from whatever had been holding it. I don't remember much of what happened next. The pain from the burns on my hands and leg, combined with the hypothermia setting in and probably shock, caused me to black out. When I came to, my truck had rolled to a stop on the side of the road. The shapes were gone. The abandoned trucks were gone. I was alone in the darkness, with a dead engine, no heat, and the temperature dropping toward -40.
I knew I had maybe an hour before hypothermia killed me. I grabbed my emergency supplies, sleeping bag, chemical hand warmers, emergency beacon, and stumbled out of my truck. The cold hit me like a physical blow, so intense it felt like being punched in the chest. I activated the emergency beacon and crawled into my sleeping bag on the road itself, hoping another truck would come along before I froze to death. One did, about 40 minutes later, according to the hospital staff who eventually treated me. A southbound driver saw my beacon and stopped, found me barely conscious on the side of the road, and got me into his heated cab. He radioed for help and stayed with me until a medevac helicopter could reach our location. By the time I was coherent enough to answer questions, search and rescue had found my truck about 2 miles back from where the driver had picked me up. They said I must have walked that distance in my delirium, though I have no memory of it. The truck was found with all its windows shattered, the interior completely coated in thick ice, and the steering wheel frozen solid. The electronics were fried beyond repair, filled with corrupted data that the investigators said looked almost like language, like something had tried to communicate through the computer systems and burn them out in the process. They never found the drilling equipment I'd been hauling,
The trailer was still attached to my truck, but it was completely empty. Whatever I'd been transporting was gone. And the pendant? Gone too. I woke up in the hospital without it, and when I asked the rescue team if they'd found anything like that on me, they said no. The only thing they found was a circular burn scar on my chest, right over my heart, in the exact shape and size of that carved bone pendant. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from severe frostbite, hypothermia, and second-degree burns on my hands and thigh. The doctor said I was incredibly lucky, that by all rights I should have lost fingers and toes for frostbite, should have suffered permanent damage from the cold exposure. But except for some scarring and occasional numbness in my fingers, I healed completely. I tried to go back to ice road driving after I recovered, I really did. But the first time I sat in a truck cab and started to drive north toward the Dalton Highway, I had a panic attack so severe I had to pull over and call for help. The same thing happened the second time I tried, and the third. Eventually, I had to accept that my career as an ice road trucker was over. Whatever happened to me on that road, whatever I drove through and somehow survived, had broken something in me that couldn't be fixed. I can't drive in extreme cold anymore, can't handle darkness that goes on for too long, can't look at ice formations without seeing faces in them, frozen, screaming faces reaching out for warmth they'll never have again. I moved to Anchorage and got a job doing local deliveries, nothing that takes me more than 50 miles from the city limits. It pays a fraction of what ice road driving paid, but at least I can sleep at night. Most nights, anyway. I did go back to that truck stop on the Yukon River about a year after the incident. I wanted to find the old man who'd given me the pendant, wanted to thank him because I'm certain that carved bone charm is the only reason I'm alive. But the truck stop had changed hands, and the new owners didn't know anything about a native Alaskan man who used to work there. They showed me employment records going back 5 years. His name wasn't on them. I asked around in nearby communities, described him to everyone who would listen. Nobody knew who I was talking about. It was like he'd never existed. But he did exist. The burn scar on my chest proves it. And sometimes, when the temperature drops and I'm alone in the dark, I can feel that phantom heat again, warm against my heart, and I know that whatever that pendant was, whatever protection it offered, it saved my life by destroying itself. I've done a lot of research since then, trying to understand what I encountered on the Dalton Highway. The Gwich'in and Inupiat people have stories about spirits that come down from the Brooks Range in the deep winter, drawn to warmth and life. They call them by different names, but the descriptions are remarkably consistent. Entities made of cold and darkness, they can freeze a person solid in seconds, they can mimic voices and appearances to lure travelers off the road, that hunger for the heat of living things. The stories say these entities are most active during the polar night, when the sun doesn't rise for weeks or months at a time. They say the spirits hate light and warmth, but they're drawn to it, the way moths are drawn to flame. They say the only protection is to keep moving, stay warm, and carry traditional medicine prepared by those who know the old ways. I think the drilling equipment I was hauling, whatever was really in that trailer, was some kind of lure, bait to draw those entities down from the mountains, to study them or capture them or who knows what. I think the previous drivers who disappeared were probably hauling similar loads, and I think whoever arranged for those shipments knew exactly what would happen. I tried to track down my dispatcher to ask him about it, but he'd quit the company the week after my incident and moved out of state. Nobody knows where he went, and he won't return calls or emails. I hit a dead end there too.
The official explanation for what happened to me is exposure-induced hallucination combined with equipment failure and disorientation. The investigation concluded that I experienced a mental break due to extreme cold and isolation, imagined most of what I reported, and wandered away from my truck in a state of delirium before being rescued. Case closed. But I know what I saw. I know what tried to take me on that frozen road.
And I know that there are 3 other drivers still missing. Their trucks found abandoned with frozen figures in the driver's seats and corrupted electronics that contain messages in a language no one can read. If you ever have to drive the Dalton Highway in winter, please listen to what I'm telling you. Don't drive alone if you can avoid it. Don't stop unless it's an absolute emergency. If your radio starts picking up voices that say things they shouldn't, turn it off immediately. If you see lights moving in the mountains, don't look at them directly and don't slow down. And if someone offers you protection, even if it seems superstitious or foolish, take it. You might need it more than you know. The Arctic is beautiful, but it's not empty. There are things up there in the darkness and cold that are older than humanity, that see us as nothing more than brief, warm sparks in an endless frozen night. And sometimes, when the conditions are right and the sun doesn't rise for weeks at a time, those things come down from the mountains looking for warmth to steal and life to freeze. I survived my encounter with them, but I left part of myself on that frozen road. The part that wasn't afraid of the dark. The part that could handle being alone in extreme conditions. The part that believed the cold was just temperature and nothing more. Now I know better, and I'll never go back to the Dalton Highway, not even in summer when the sun never sets and the road is just a road again. Because I know what's waiting up there, patient and eternal, ready for the long dark to return. Ready to turn the next warm traveler into another frozen figure sitting behind the wheel of an abandoned truck. Another voice on the radio calling out mile markers and begging someone to stop. Another missing driver who will never be found. Don't let that be you. Stay off the Dalton Highway in winter, and if you absolutely must drive it, remember what I've told you. Keep moving. Stay warm, and pray that whatever protection you carry is strong enough to get you through. Because the road to Dead Horse isn't just dangerous because of the cold and the isolation. It's dangerous because of what hunts in that cold, what lives in that isolation, what waits in the long dark for another warm spark to extinguish. And once it has your scent, once it knows your name, it will never stop calling you back to that frozen road. Never.
Story 3 comes from David Chen, Route 66, Arizona. I'm a long-haul trucker, and I've been driving across America for the past 15 years. In that time, I've seen just about everything you can imagine on the road. Accidents, police chases, drug deals going down at truck stops, prostitutes working the rest areas, even a UFO once outside of Roswell that I'm still not sure was real. I've driven through blizzards, tornadoes, and 100-degree desert heat. I thought nothing could shake me anymore. I was wrong. What happened to me 3 months ago on a lonely stretch of Route 66 in Arizona has fundamentally changed how I see the world. I don't drive at night anymore if I can help it. I never stop at rest areas when I'm alone. And I really check, every single person I encounter on the road, looking for the little details that most people miss. Because sometimes the things that look most human aren't human at all. It was mid-October, and I was hauling a load of furniture from Los Angeles to Oklahoma City. I'd been on the road for about 8 hours, and the sun was just starting to set as I merged onto historic Route 66 outside of Kingman, Arizona. I like taking the old route when I can. It adds maybe an hour to the trip, but there's something peaceful about those empty 2-lane highways that cut through the desert, away from the traffic and stress of the interstates. The October sky was doing that thing it does in the desert, turning shades of orange and purple and red that don't look real, like someone had cranked up the saturation on a photograph. My radio was playing classic country, and I was thinking about stopping for dinner in Williams when I saw her. She was standing on the side of the road, maybe 50 yards ahead, right where the highway curved around a rocky outcrop. At first I thought she might be a mirage. The way the setting sun was hitting the asphalt made everything shimmer and waver. But as I got closer, I could see she was real. A woman, maybe mid-30s, wearing jeans and a white t-shirt, waving her arms over her head in the universal signal for please stop. I started to slow down. Look, I know what you're thinking. This is how horror movies start, and didn't my mother teach me better than to pick up hitchhikers in the middle of nowhere? But here's the thing about being a trucker. You develop a sense about people. You have to, when you're spending time at truck stops and rest areas where all kinds of characters hang out. And this woman didn't set off any of my warning bells. She looked scared, desperate, but not dangerous. Plus, I could see a car about 100 yards behind her pulled off on the shoulder with its hood up, broken down clearly. And the nearest town was at least 20 miles away. What was I supposed to do, leave her stranded in the desert as night fell? I pulled my rig onto the shoulder, about 20 feet past her, and climbed down from the cab. The October air was already getting cold. Desert nights do that, dropping 40 degrees as soon as the sun goes down. The woman was jogging toward me, and I got my first good look at her face. She was pretty, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and brown eyes that looked red from crying. Dust covered her clothes, and there was a smudge of grease or dirt on her left cheek. She looked exactly like someone who had been stuck on the side of the road for a while, frustrated, scared, and relieved that someone had finally stopped. "Oh, thank God," she said as she reached me, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've been stuck here for 2 hours. My phone doesn't have any signal, and you're the first person to stop." "What happened to your car?" I asked, nodding toward her vehicle behind her. "I don't know. It just died. One minute I was driving fine, and the next, the engine cut out and I coasted to a stop. I tried calling AAA, but, like I said, no signal out here." She hugged herself against the cold. "Is there any way you could give me a ride to the next town? I can call for a tow truck from there." Something flickered in the back of my mind. Not quite a warning, but a question mark. Something wasn't quite right, though I couldn't put my finger on what it was. "Sure," I said. "Hop in. But first, let me take a look at your car. Maybe it's something simple." Her face did something strange then. Just for a fraction of a second, her expression went completely blank. Not scared, not relieved, not anything. Like someone had hit a pause button on her face. Then the emotion flooded back and she smiled too wide, showing too many teeth. "That's so kind of you, but I really think we should just go. It's getting dark and I'm freezing." "It'll just take a minute," I insisted, already walking toward her car. I don't know why I pushed the issue. Maybe it was that strange blank expression. Maybe it was trucker instinct, but something was telling me to look at that car before I let this woman into my cab. She followed me, and I could hear her footsteps on the asphalt behind me, regular, rhythmic footsteps that somehow sounded wrong. I couldn't explain how footsteps could sound wrong, but they did. When I reached the car, a newer model Toyota Camry with California plates, I walked around to the front and looked under the open hood. I'm not a mechanic, but I know enough about engines to identify obvious problems. and what I saw made my blood run cold. The engine was completely clean. Not just clean like someone had recently washed it, but pristine. No dust, no dirt, no oil residue, nothing. The battery terminals looked like they had just come out of the package.
The belts and hoses looked brand new. And here's the thing that really got me. There wasn't a single bug splattered anywhere under that hood. You drive through the Arizona desert in October, and you're gonna hit bugs. Lots of them. They get everywhere. On your windshield, in your grill, under your hood when you open it up. But this car, which had supposedly been driving along Route 66 before breaking down, didn't have a single insect on it. It looked like it had never been driven at all. I turned around slowly, and the woman was standing about 10 feet behind me. She wasn't hugging herself anymore. She wasn't shivering. She was just standing there, perfectly still, watching me with those brown eyes that suddenly didn't look quite right. The pupils were too large, too dark, like pools of ink spreading across her irises. "Find the problem?" she asked, and her voice sounded different too, flatter, like she was reading from a script she didn't quite understand. "No," I lied. "Everything looks fine under there. Maybe you just ran out of gas." I walked past her toward the fuel door, needing an excuse to check something else, needing to confirm what my gut was already screaming at me. The fuel door was locked, but through the little window in the cap, I could see the tank was 3/4 full. "Plenty of gas," I said, straightening up. My heart was pounding now, adrenaline flooding my system. Every instinct I had was telling me to get back to my truck and get the hell out of there. The woman smiled again, that too wide smile. "Maybe you could still give me that ride." "Sure thing," I said, backing toward my truck. "Let me just grab my phone from the cab. I might have a signal. I've got a better carrier than most." I was maybe 15 feet from my truck when she moved. I've never seen anything move that fast. 1 second, she was standing by her car, and the next she was between me and my truck, blocking my path. She didn't run, she didn't walk, she just moved, like frames had been cut out of a film and she'd simply appeared in a new position. Up close, I could see what I'd missed before. Her skin was too smooth, too perfect, like plastic. Her chest wasn't moving, she wasn't breathing, and when she opened her mouth to speak, I could see that her teeth, while white and straight, were all exactly the same size and shape. No variations, no slight crookedness or individual character. They looked like they'd been stamped out by a machine. "I really do need a ride, David," she said, and hearing my name come out of her mouth made my stomach drop. I hadn't told her my name. My name wasn't on my truck. There was no way she could have known. "How do you know my name?" I asked, my voice shaking. She tilted her head to the side, too far, like an owl. "I know lots of things about you, David Chen. I know you're 42 years old. I know you've been driving trucks for 15 years. I know you live alone in a small apartment in Sacramento. I know your mother died 3 years ago, and you visit her grave every month. I know you're lonely." Each word felt like ice sliding down my spine. This thing, because it definitely wasn't a woman, wasn't human, had somehow accessed information about my life, personal information, that wasn't public, wasn't online, wasn't anywhere that some random stranger on Route 66 could have found. "What are you?" I whispered. She smiled again, and this time her face did something that faces shouldn't be able to do. It rippled, like the surface of a pond when you throw a stone in. For just a second, I saw what was underneath, something pale and smooth and utterly alien, with too many angles and none enough curves. Then the face settled back into its human mask, but now I couldn't unsee the wrongness of it. "I'm someone who needs a ride," she said.
I'm someone who's been waiting on this road for a very long time, and you're going to take me where I need to go." "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm not." I feinted left, then broke right, sprinting for my truck. I'm not a young man anymore, and I'm carrying more weight than I should, but fear gave me speed I didn't know I still had. I reached the cab, yanked the door open, and hauled myself up into the driver's seat in one motion. She was already there, sitting in the passenger seat, wearing that same white t-shirt and jeans, looking at me with those wrong eyes and that plastic smile. The door I'd locked before getting out was still locked. The windows were all closed, but she was inside my truck, and I had no idea how. "I really do need a ride, David," she repeated. "Please, I can't do this without your help." My hand was on the door handle, ready to jump back out, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she said please, with what sounded like genuine desperation. Maybe it was the fact that she hadn't actually hurt me yet, despite ample opportunity. Or maybe I was just in shock, my brain refusing to process what was happening. "Where do you want to go?" I heard myself ask. She pointed ahead, down Route 66 toward the darkening eastern horizon. "There's a rest stop about 30 miles from here. I need you to take me there." "Why that rest stop? What's there?" "Someone I need to see. Someone who's waiting." "Who's waiting? What are you?" She turned to look at me fully, and in the fading light, I could see something moving under her skin, like shadows swimming just beneath the surface. "I'm someone who made a terrible mistake a long time ago, and I'm trying to fix it before it's too late. That's all you need to know. Please, David, will you take me to the rest stop?" I should have said no. I should have jumped out of the truck and run into the desert and not stopped running until I found help. But there was something in her voice, beneath the wrongness, beneath the inhuman quality of it, that sounded genuinely afraid. And despite everything, despite the terror that had my hands shaking and my heart racing, I found myself nodding. "Okay," I said quietly, "I'll take you to the rest stop." She didn't thank me. She just turned to face forward, her hands folded in her lap, and waited for me to start driving. The 30 miles to that rest stop was the longest 30 miles of my life. We drove in complete silence. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead at the darkening highway. I kept glancing over at her, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, but my brain refused to accept it. The human mind isn't built to process things that look human but aren't, things that violate the basic rules of reality.
The rest stop finally appeared in my headlights. A small parking area with restrooms, a few picnic tables, and those tall parking lot lights that cast everything in harsh yellow light. There were no other vehicles there. It was completely deserted. I pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the restrooms. "We're here," I said. She nodded once, then turned to look at me. "Thank you, David. You've been very kind. I'm sorry I frightened you." "What happens now?" I asked. She glanced toward the women's restroom. "Now I go in there, and I wait, and you drive away, and you forget this ever happened." "Forget? How am I supposed to forget this?" "You'll find a way. Humans are good at forgetting things that don't make sense." She reached for the door handle, then paused. "David, a piece of advice. When you're driving at night and you see someone on the side of the road who needs help, trust your instincts. Not everyone who looks human is human, and not everything that looks like it needs help actually does." "What were you going to do to me if I hadn't agreed to bring you here?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something like sadness flicker across her face. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was desperate enough to find out. I'm glad I didn't have to." She opened the door and climbed out of my truck. I watched as she walked across the parking lot toward the restroom, her movements slightly off, like someone who'd learned to walk by watching videos, but had never quite mastered the natural rhythm of it. She reached the door to the women's restroom, pulled it open, and stepped inside. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, my engine idling, trying to decide what to do. Should I go check the restroom? Should I call the police? Should I just drive away and pretend none of this happened? In the end, curiosity won. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and climbed out of my truck. The October night was fully dark now, and cold enough that I could see my breath. My footsteps echoed across the empty parking lot as I approached the restroom. I pushed open the women's restroom door and shined my flashlight inside. It was a standard highway rest stop bathroom, 3 stalls, 2 sinks, the smell of industrial cleaner and stale air, and it was completely empty. I checked every stall. I looked in the corners, behind the door, even in the trash can. There was nowhere she could be hiding, and no other way out of the bathroom. But she was gone, as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. I walked back to my truck in a daze. As I climbed into the cab, I noticed something on the passenger seat, a small piece of paper, folded once. I picked it up with shaking hands and unfolded it. In neat, precise handwriting, it said, "Thank you for your kindness. You may have saved more lives than you know. If anyone ever asks you about the woman on Route 66 in Arizona, tell them she's finished. Tell them she's finally going home. Sarah." I still have that note. I keep it in my wallet, and sometimes when I'm questioning whether any of it really happened, or if I just had some kind of breakdown, I take it out and look at it. The paper is real. The handwriting is real, which means she was real too, whatever she was. I did some research after that night, though I wasn't even sure what I was researching. I searched for disappearances Route 66, Arizona, and missing persons, rest stops, and strange encounters Arizona highways. I found more than I expected. There was a pattern. Every few years, someone would report picking up a hitchhiker on Route 66 in that area who would ask to be taken to that specific rest stop, then vanish. The descriptions varied. Sometimes it was a woman, sometimes a man, sometimes someone who looked young, sometimes old. But they all had certain things in common. They moved strangely, they knew things they shouldn't know, and they all asked to be taken to the same rest stop. The most recent report I found was from 2019, posted on a trucker forum. A driver named Mike Williams described an experience almost identical to mine. Picked up a woman on Route 66, realized something was wrong, took her to the rest stop anyway, watched her disappear into the bathroom. He ended his post with, "I don't know what I picked up that night, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't human. If you're driving Route 66 through Arizona and someone flags you down, keep driving. Trust me on this." But here's what really got me. I couldn't find any reports after that 2019 post. I searched every trucker forum, every paranormal website I could access. Nothing. It was like whatever had been happening on that stretch of road had suddenly stopped. I think about that note sometimes. Tell them she's finished. Tell them she's finally going home. I don't know what Sarah was, or what she was doing on that highway, or who she needed to meet at that rest stop. I don't know if she was dangerous, or lost, or something else entirely. But I think maybe, by giving her that ride, I helped end something. Some cycle that had been repeating for years, with Sarah, or whatever wore her face, appearing on that road again and again, asking for help, trying to reach that rest stop. I hope she made it home. wherever home is for something like that. I still drive Route 66 sometimes, though never at night, and I never stop at that rest stop anymore. During the day, it looks perfectly normal, just another highway rest area with tired travelers using the facilities and eating lunch at the picnic tables. But I can't forget what I saw that October night, can't forget the woman who wasn't a woman climbing out of my truck and disappearing into a bathroom with no other exits. My advice is, if you're driving Route 66 through Arizona and you see someone on the side of the road asking for help, think twice before you stop. Check for the little details. Are they breathing? Do their movements look natural? Are there bugs on their car if it's supposedly broken down? Do their eyes look quite right in the light? Because sometimes the things that look most human are the furthest from it. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is keep driving and pretend you never saw them at all. Some people can't be helped. Some people shouldn't be helped. And some people aren't people at all.
Story 4 comes from Rebecca Martinez, Blue Ridge Parkway, North Carolina. I'm writing this from my parents' house in Asheville, where I've been staying for the past month. I can't go back to my apartment yet. I can't be alone. Every time I close my eyes, I see that fog rolling down the mountain, thick and white and hungry, and I see the things that moved inside it. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I'm a nature photographer. Or at least I was. I'm not sure I can do that job anymore, not after what happened on the Blue Ridge Parkway last month. It's hard to appreciate the beauty of nature when you've seen what can hide in it, waiting. I'd been planning this trip for over a year. October in the Blue Ridge Mountains is legendary for photographers. The fall colors are spectacular, and the morning fog that settles in the valleys creates these ethereal, dreamlike landscapes that are absolute magic on camera. I'd booked a week off work, loaded up my Subaru with camera equipment and camping gear, and set off from Charlotte with high hopes and a detailed itinerary of the best spots along the parkway. The first 3 days were perfect. I got sunrise shots at craggy gardens that made me want to cry, they were so beautiful. I photographed waterfalls near Mount Pisgah, hiked to overlooks where I could see mountains stretching out in every direction like blue waves frozen in time. I camped at designated sites, met other photographers and hikers, and felt more alive than I had in months. On the 4th day, I decided to venture off the main parkway to explore some of the less traveled areas. I'd read about an old Forest Service road that led to an abandoned fire tower, supposedly offering 360-degree views of the mountains. The road wasn't on most maps anymore, and according to the forum where I'd found the information, very few people knew about it, which meant no crowds, no other photographers, and the chance to get shots that were truly unique. I found the turnoff around noon, a narrow gravel road marked only by a faded wooden post with the number 47 carved into it. The road was rough, full of potholes and loose rocks, and my Subaru bounced and rattled as I drove deeper into the forest. The trees pressed in on both sides, their branches creating a tunnel of red and gold leaves that filtered the sunlight into amber patterns on my windshield. After about 3 miles, The road opened into a small clearing where the fire tower stood. It was more intact than I'd expected. A metal structure, maybe 60 feet tall, with stairs zigzagging up to a small cabin at the top. The cabin's windows were broken, and the door hung crooked on its hinges, but the tower itself looked sturdy enough. I parked my Subaru at the edge of the clearing and got out, camera in hand. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and decaying leaves. It was absolutely silent. No birds, no insects, no distant traffic sounds, just the whisper of wind through the trees and the occasional creak of the fire tower swaying slightly in the breeze. I spent about an hour photographing the tower from different angles, then decided to climb it. I know. Trespassing on abandoned government property, probably not the safest decision. But the photos from up top would be incredible, and I'd come all this way. I tested the first few steps carefully, making sure they'd hold my weight, and then started climbing. The view from the top was everything I'd hoped for. Mountains in every direction, their slopes painted in autumn colors, so vibrant they almost didn't look real. I could see the parkway snaking through the valleys far below, and in the distance, what looked like the skyline of Asheville, hazy and indistinct. I took shot after shot, adjusting my settings, trying different compositions, completely absorbed in my work. That's when I noticed the fog. It appeared first in the valley directly to the east, a thick white mass that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. One moment the valley was clear, and the next it was filling with fog so dense I couldn't see the trees at the bottom anymore. I watched, fascinated, as the fog began to rise, climbing up the slopes of the mountains like something alive. But it wasn't rising like normal fog. Normal fog drifts, it spreads gradually, it follows the contours of the land. This fog was moving with purpose, flowing uphill in rivers and streams that defied gravity and logic. And it was fast. I watched it swallow the parkway in seconds, watched it pour over ridgelines and cascade down the far sides like a white waterfall.
I raised my camera and started shooting. Whatever was happening, it was visually incredible, and the photographer in me couldn't resist. Through my telephoto lens, I could see the fog in detail. It wasn't smooth and uniform like normal fog. It had texture, movement, eddies and currents swirling within it like a living thing. And then I saw something else. There were shapes in the fog. Dark silhouettes that moved against the white background, appearing and disappearing as the fog churned and rolled. At first I thought they might be trees, their trunks visible through gaps in the fog. But trees don't move. These shapes were definitely moving, gliding through the fog with fluid, deliberate motions. I zoomed in as far as my lens would go, trying to get a clear look at one of the shapes. My viewfinder filled with white fog, and for a moment I couldn't see anything. Then a shape passed directly through my frame, and I got a good look at it for maybe 2 seconds before it vanished again. It was tall and impossibly thin, like a person stretched vertically until their proportions were all wrong. Its limbs were too long, its body too narrow, and it moved in a way that reminded me of footage I'd seen of deep-sea creatures, sinuous and alien, adapted for an environment completely different from our own. I couldn't make out any details of its face or features, just a dark silhouette against the white fog. My hands started shaking and I nearly dropped my camera. I pulled back from the viewfinder and looked with my naked eyes at the fog, which was now maybe half a mile away and still climbing toward my position. I could see more of those shapes now, dozens of them, moving through the fog in what almost looked like a pattern, like fish schooling or birds flocking. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get down from that tower and get in my car and get the hell off this mountain. But I was frozen, unable to look away from the approaching fog and the things that moved within it. Part of my brain was still trying to rationalize what I was seeing, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon maybe,
or shadows cast by the trees, or a trick of the light. Then I heard the sound. It came from inside the fog, a low humming that was more felt than heard. It vibrated in my chest, made my teeth ache, resonated in my bones. And underneath the humming was something else. Voices, maybe, or something like voices. Not words exactly, but sounds that had the rhythm and cadence of speech, rising and falling like a conversation in a language I'd never heard. The fog was maybe a quarter-mile away now, close enough that I could smell it. It didn't smell like normal fog, like moisture and clean air. It smelled wrong, like ozone and copper and something organic that had gone rotten. The smell hit me like a physical blow, and suddenly I could move again. I practically threw myself down the fire tower stairs, taking them 2 and 3 at a time, not caring if I fell, just needing to get down and get to my car. Behind me, I could hear the fog getting closer, that humming growing louder, and underneath it, the sound of footsteps on metal. Something was climbing the fire tower behind me. I didn't look back. I hit the ground running and sprinted for my Subaru. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition, but somehow I managed it. The engine turned over and I threw the car into reverse, backing up so fast I nearly hit a tree. The fog had reached the clearing. It poured over the edge like milk spilling from a glass, flowing across the ground in tendrils that reached for my car. I shifted into drive and floored the accelerator, my tires spitting gravel as I raced for the Forest Service Road. In my rearview mirror, I could see the fire tower disappearing into the fog. And standing at the top, in the broken doorway of the cabin, was one of those shapes. It was facing my direction, and even though I couldn't make out any features, I had the overwhelming sensation that it was watching me leave. The humming sound intensified for a moment, and I felt something push against my mind, like fingers trying to pry open a door I didn't know was there. Then I was in the tunnel of trees, racing down the Forest Service Road as fast as my Subaru could handle it. Branches scraped against my doors and windows. My camera equipment was bouncing around in the back, probably getting damaged, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from that fog and whatever was inside it. The fog followed me. I could see it in my mirrors, flowing down the Forest Service Road behind me like a flash flood, moving faster than any fog had a right to move. Those shapes were in it, keeping pace with my car, sometimes getting close enough that I could see them clearly through the white. Tall, thin, wrong. My Subaru hit a pothole and bounced hard, and I heard something snap underneath. The steering wheel started pulling to the right, and I knew I damaged something important. But I couldn't stop. The fog was maybe 50 feet behind me now, and those things inside it were reaching forward, their 2 long arms extending toward my car. I saw the parkway ahead, the main road that would take me away from this nightmare. My car was shuddering, making grinding noises, but it was still moving. 20 more seconds. 10. 5. I burst out of the Forest Service Road and swerved onto the parkway, nearly colliding with an RV that was cruising past. The driver laid on his horn and gave me a hand gesture I definitely deserved, but I didn't care. I was on the main road, surrounded by other cars, back in civilization. I pulled over at the first overlook I came to, shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. I looked back at the Forest Service Road turnoff. The fog was there, swirling at the edge of the forest like waves hitting a shore. But it wasn't coming any further. It stayed at the tree line, as if there was some invisible barrier it couldn't cross. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, watching the fog, waiting for those shapes to emerge from the trees. But they never did. Eventually, the fog began to dissipate, thinning and fading until it was gone completely. The Forest Service Road looked normal again, just a narrow gravel path leading into the trees. My phone had signal at the overlook, and I called a tow truck. My Subaru had broken an axle apparently and wasn't safe to drive. While I waited for the truck, I went through the photos on my camera, looking at the shots I'd taken from the fire tower. Most of them were normal, beautiful mountain vistas, fall colors, the kind of shots I'd come to the Blue Ridge to capture.
But the last dozen photos, the ones I'd taken of the fog, were different. The fog showed up in the photos, clear and detailed, but the shapes inside it were clearer too. And with the ability to zoom in on the digital files and really examine them, I could see details that had been hidden when I was looking through my viewfinder in real time. They weren't creatures, exactly. They were more like gaps, absences in the shape of beings. Where they moved through the fog, there was nothing. Not darkness, not shadows, but genuine nothingness. Like someone had cut holes in reality, and these voids were moving around in roughly humanoid forms. And where these voids passed, the fog changed color slightly, taking on a faint reddish tinge that reminded me, sickeningly, of blood in water. In one photo, I'd accidentally captured the fire tower cabin. The void shape I'd seen in the doorway was clearly visible, and it was facing the camera, facing me. And even though it had no features, no face, no eyes, I could feel its attention like a weight pressing against my chest, even through the photograph. I deleted that photo immediately. Then I deleted all the photos of the fog. I couldn't handle looking at them, couldn't handle the feeling that by capturing those things on camera, I'd somehow connected myself to them. It was probably irrational, but I didn't care. The photos were gone, and I felt marginally better for it. The tow truck took me and my Subaru back to Asheville. I had the car repaired, but I never went back to finish my photography trip. I couldn't. Every time I thought about driving on the Blue Ridge Parkway, my hands would start shaking, and I'd feel that humming in my chest again, that sensation of something trying to push its way into my mind. I did some research when I got back to my parents' house. I searched for fog, Blue Ridge Mountains, and strange phenomena, Blue Ridge Parkway, and variations thereof. I found more than I wanted to. The Cherokee people, who lived in these mountains long before European settlers arrived, have stories about certain valleys and peaks that should be avoided. Places where the fog comes down and spirits walk. They say these are thin places, where the boundary between our world and others is permeable, and sometimes things from the other side can cross over. There are also more recent accounts, though they're scattered and often dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications. Hikers who got lost in unexpected fog and came out hours or days later with missing time and no memory of what happened. Hunters who saw figures moving through the fog that disappeared when they got close. Park rangers who quietly advise people to avoid certain areas when fog is forecasted. One account I found particularly disturbing was from a park ranger who posted anonymously on a hiking forum in 2017. He said he'd been called to search for a missing photographer who'd been exploring old Forest Service roads off the parkway. They found the photographer's car 3 days later, parked at an abandoned fire tower. The car was unlocked, the keys still in the ignition, and all of the photographer's equipment was still in the vehicle. But the photographer was gone. They searched for 2 weeks and never found any trace of him. No footprints leading away from the car, no signs of a struggle, nothing. It was like he'd simply vanished into thin air. The ranger's post ended with the warning, "There are places on the parkway that aren't meant for people. Old places that were here long before we built our roads through them. If you see fog moving in ways fog shouldn't move, get out. Don't try to document it. Don't try to understand it. Just leave. Some things aren't meant to be seen." I think about that missing photographer sometimes.
I think about how close I came to being another mysterious disappearance, another unsolved case for the park rangers to puzzle over. If my axle hadn't broken when it did, would I have made it out? Or would that fog have caught up to me, and those void shapes would have pulled me into whatever nowhere place they came from? I don't know. And I'm not eager to find out. I've tried to go back to photography since then, but my heart isn't in it anymore. Every beautiful landscape I see, every foggy morning that would have once excited me, now fills me with dread, because I know what can hide in the fog now. I know there are gaps in the world where things that aren't things can move around, and sometimes they come close enough to our reality that we can see them. The Blue Ridge Mountains are beautiful. The Blue Ridge Parkway is one of the most scenic drives in America. But there are places along that parkway, old Forest Service roads leading to abandoned structures, where you shouldn't go. Especially not when the fog is rolling in. I was lucky. I got out. But I left something up on that mountain. Not just my camera photos, but my ability to see nature as something purely beautiful and benign. Now, I see it as what it really is. Vast and ancient and utterly indifferent to human life. And in the thin places, where the boundaries blur, I see it as something more than indifferent. I see it as hungry. If you're planning to drive the Blue Ridge Parkway, please be careful. Stay on the main roads. Don't explore abandoned service roads, no matter how promising the photography opportunities seem. And if you see fog moving in impossible ways, if you hear humming that makes your bones ache, if you see tall, thin shapes gliding through the white, do what I did. Run. Don't stop to take pictures. Don't try to rationalize what you're seeing. Don't let curiosity override your survival instinct. Just get in your car and get back to the main road and don't look back. Because unlike me, you might not be lucky enough to break your axle at just the right moment. You might drive just a little too far into that fog, and those void shapes might get close enough to reach your car. And then you'll disappear, just like that photographer in 2017, and nobody will ever know what happened to you. The mountains will keep your secret. The fog will hide the truth. And somewhere, in those thin places where reality wears thin, something that isn't something will be wearing your shape, moving through the white, waiting for the next curious photographer to drive down the wrong Forest Service road. I'm one of the ones who got away, but I don't feel lucky. I feel haunted. And every time the weather forecast calls for fog in the mountains, I make sure I'm nowhere near the Blue Ridge Parkway, because some views aren't worth the cost of seeing them. And some photographs capture things that should never be captured at all. Stay safe out there. And remember, not all fog is just water vapor suspended in air. Sometimes it's something else entirely. Something old and hungry and patient. And it's waiting for you to make the same mistake I did.
Story 5 comes from Thomas Garrett, Highway 50, Nevada. They call Highway 50 across Nevada the loneliest road in America, and I used to think that was just a marketing gimmick, a catchy name to attract tourists looking for an authentic desert experience. After what happened to me last month, I understand that the loneliness isn't just about the lack of people or towns. It's about something deeper, something that exists in those vast, empty spaces between civilization, something that doesn't want you to leave once you're out there alone. My name is Thomas Garrett, and I'm a sales representative for a tech company based in San Francisco. My job involves a lot of driving, visiting clients, attending conferences, doing product demonstrations at various locations throughout the western states. I've driven thousands of miles over the past 5 years, and I've always enjoyed it. There's something meditative about long-distance driving, something that helps me think and decompress from the stress of quotas and client demands. I'd driven Highway 50 across Nevada twice before, without incident. It's a brutally empty stretch of road, 387 miles from Fernley to the Utah border, with only a handful of tiny towns spaced so far apart you need to plan your fuel stops carefully. But it's also starkly beautiful in its desolation, and it cuts almost 2 hours off the drive from Reno to Salt Lake City compared to taking the interstate. This time, I was heading to a conference in Salt Lake City, and I'd left Reno late in the afternoon after a client meeting ran long. It was early November, and the sun was already getting low by the time I merged onto Highway 50 heading east. I knew I'd be driving most of the route in darkness, but I'd done it before and it hadn't been a problem. My BMW had excellent headlights, I had a full tank of gas, and I'd downloaded several podcasts to keep me company. The first hour was uneventful. I passed through Fernley, then Fallon, the last real town before the emptiness begins. I stopped at a gas station in Fallon to fuel up and use the restroom, even though my tank was still 3/4 full. The attendant, an older man with sun-weathered skin and sad eyes, watched me pump my gas and then called out as I was heading back to my car. "You heading east on 50? "Yeah," I said. "All the way to Delta, Utah." He nodded slowly, like I just told him I was planning to swim across an ocean. "You want to be careful out there tonight. Radio says there's some winter moving in. Nothing too serious, but visibility might get poor." "I'll keep an eye on it," I assured him. "Thanks for the heads up." He looked like he wanted to say something, but then just shook his head and went back inside the station. I thought it was odd at the time, but I dismissed it. Desert folks were often a bit peculiar, and warnings about weather were just part of living in harsh climates. I wish I'd asked him what he really wanted to say. By the time I passed through Middlegate, barely a settlement, just a bar and a tiny population, it was full dark. The kind of darkness that only exists in the middle of nowhere, where there are no city lights bleeding into the sky, no glow on the horizon, nothing. Just my headlights cutting a tunnel through the black, and beyond that, emptiness. The podcast I'd been listening to ended, and I scrolled through my phone to find another one. That's when I noticed I had no signal. Not unusual out here. Cell coverage on Highway 50 is sporadic at best. But that meant no streaming music or podcasts, so I switched to FM radio. Static on every station. I scanned through the entire dial twice, nothing but white noise and occasional strange warbling sounds that didn't sound like any interference I'd heard before. I tried AM next with the same results. My car's display showed the radio was functioning normally, but there was literally nothing to pick up out here. Fine, I'd driven in silence before. Actually, maybe it would be good to just think for a while. Enjoy the solitude that Highway 50 was famous for. Except the silence wasn't quite silent. Even with my windows up and the climate control running, I could hear something. A low hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once.
At first I thought it might be my engine, but the pitch didn't change when I accelerated or decelerated. It was constant, unchanging, like the background hum of a refrigerator or electrical transformer, but lower and somehow more organic.
I tried the radio again. Still nothing but static. But as I was scanning through the stations, I thought I heard something in the static. A pattern maybe, or voices speaking just below the threshold of intelligibility. I stopped on 91.1 FM and turned the volume up. For a few seconds, there was just static. Then, clear as day, I heard my own voice. "Heading east, on 50. It was what I'd said to the gas station attendant in Fallon, my exact words in my exact voice, but with a strange echo quality, like the recording had been made in a large empty room. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The static resumed, and I quickly switched the radio off. My heart was pounding. What the hell was that? Some kind of radio delay? But that didn't make sense. The gas station attendant and I hadn't been near any radio equipment. And even if we had been, why would it be broadcasting on a random FM frequency in the middle of the Nevada desert? I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else had said the same words, or my brain had filled in familiar patterns from random noise. Pareidolia, like seeing faces in clouds. Nothing to worry about. Then I saw the car. It appeared in my rearview mirror. Headlights suddenly there where a moment before there had been only darkness. High beams, bright enough to flood my entire car with white light and make it hard to see the road ahead. I flipped the rearview mirror to night mode to reduce the glare and checked my side mirror. The car was maybe 50 feet behind me, maintaining a steady distance. Finally, another driver. I wasn't alone out here anymore. The thought was comforting, even if the high beams were annoying. I tapped my brakes a few times, a signal for them to back off or dim their lights. The car behind me didn't react. Same distance, same brightness. I tried it again, pumping my brakes more obviously. Nothing. "Come on, man," I muttered. "Either pass me or back off." As if in response to my words, the car suddenly accelerated and pulled into the left lane. It drew up alongside me and I glanced over, ready to give the driver an annoyed look. There was no one in the car. I could see clearly into the other vehicle. It looked like a sedan, maybe a Toyota or Honda, dark-colored, and the driver's seat was empty. So was the passenger seat. The car was operating itself, driving at exactly my speed in perfect parallel with nobody behind the wheel. I jerked my head back to focus on the road, my mind reeling. That was impossible. I'd seen wrong, must have seen wrong. The angle was bad, or the lights created an illusion, or there was someone driving and I just couldn't see them properly. I forced myself to look again. Still no driver. The car continued to pace me, close enough that I could see into the interior clearly. Empty driver's seat, empty passenger seat, hands on the steering wheel, but no body attached to them. Wait, no, there weren't any hands on the steering wheel. The wheel was turning by itself, making small adjustments to keep the car perfectly aligned with mine. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my BMW from 70 to 80. The driverless car accelerated smoothly to match. 85, 90, 95. The car stayed with me, never falling behind, never pulling ahead, maintaining that perfect parallel position. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it dropped back. I watched in my mirror as it fell behind me, slowing down, the headlights getting smaller. Within a few seconds,
It had disappeared completely into the darkness. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I was breathing too fast, on the edge of hyperventilating. What the hell had I just seen? Self-driving cars existed, sure, but they didn't just cruise around empty highways in the middle of the night with no one inside them. And even if someone was testing autonomous vehicle technology out here, why would they pull up alongside another car and pace it like that? Unless it wasn't a test. Unless it wasn't technology at all. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The radio was still off. I didn't dare turn it back on and hear my own voice coming through the static again. The road stretched ahead, empty and straight, disappearing into the cone of my headlights. According to my GPS, I was about 50 miles from Austin, the next tiny town along the route. 50 miles. I could make that. Get to Austin, stop at whatever passed for a gas station or restaurant there, be around other people, figure out what the hell was happening. That's when all my lights went out. Not just the headlights. Everything. Headlights, dashboard lights, the glow from my phone charger, even the tiny LEDs on my door locks. My car was suddenly in complete and utter darkness, still moving at 90 miles per hour down a highway I could no longer see. I screamed and slammed on the brakes, my hands yanking the wheel to what I hoped was center, trying desperately to keep the car on the road when I couldn't see the road. The BMW slowed, the anti-lock brakes chattering, and I felt the tires drift onto the shoulder, felt gravel pinging against the undercarriage. Then, just as suddenly as they'd gone out, the lights came back on. I was stopped at an angle across both lanes, half on the highway and half on the shoulder. My engine had stalled. The silence was absolute except for my ragged breathing and the tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, trying to get my heart rate under control, trying to convince my hands to stop shaking enough that I could restart the car.
In the glow of my headlights, I could see Highway 50 stretching ahead, empty and straight. In my mirrors, I could see it stretching behind me, equally empty. But something felt wrong. The quality of the darkness beyond my headlights had changed. It felt denser somehow, more present, like it wasn't just absence of light, but something actively dark pressing in against the small bubble of illumination my car created. I reached for the ignition, ready to restart the engine, when I heard it. Footsteps. Someone was walking toward my car from behind, their footsteps crunching on the gravel shoulder. Steady, unhurried footsteps, like someone out for a casual stroll on a deserted highway in the middle of the night. I looked in my rearview mirror, but couldn't see anyone. The footsteps continued, getting closer. I checked my side mirror. Nothing. But the footsteps were definitely getting louder, definitely approaching my driver's side door. Every horror movie I'd ever seen was playing through my mind. Don't get out of the car. Never get out of the car. Whatever you do, stay in the car and drive away. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught. Thank God. I started to shift into drive when something appeared in my peripheral vision. A figure was standing next to my driver's side window. Tall, wearing what looked like dark clothing, face hidden in shadow. It raised one hand and knocked on my window. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't look directly at it. I kept my eyes forward, shifted into drive, and floored the accelerator. My tires spun on the gravel, found purchase, and my BMW leaped forward. In my side mirror, I saw the figure standing in the middle of the highway, arms still raised, watching me drive away. Then there were 2 figures, then 3, then 5, all standing in a line across the highway, all perfectly still, all watching my car disappear into the distance. I pushed my BMW to 100 miles an hour, then 110, faster than I'd ever driven in my life. The engine was screaming, the whole car was shaking, but I didn't care. I needed to get away from those figures, needed to get to Austin, needed to be around people and lights and normalcy. The radio turned itself on. Static blared from my speakers, so loud I flinched. Then my voice came through again, but this time it wasn't just repeating what I'd said. It was speaking new words in my voice, words I'd never said. Thomas Garrett, Thomas Garrett, Thomas Garrett. You're on the loneliest road. You're all alone. Thomas Garrett. Nobody knows you're here. Thomas Garrett. You're not going to make it. Thomas Garrett. You're going to stay with us. Thomas Garrett. You're already gone. Thomas Garrett. Thomas Garrett. Thomas Garrett. I punched the radio's power button. The voice continued, uninterrupted, my own voice chanting my name over and over. I tried the volume knob. It turned freely, but the volume didn't change. I pressed every button on the stereo system randomly, desperately. Nothing worked. My voice kept chanting my name, kept telling me I was going to stay, kept saying I was already gone. More cars appeared ahead of me. 3 of them, spread across both lanes, blocking the highway. No headlights, just dark shapes that I could barely make out in my high beams. I was going 115 miles an hour, and they were getting closer fast. I had maybe 5 seconds to decide, try to swerve around them and probably lose control, or slam on the brakes and hope I could stop in time. I chose neither. I closed my eyes, gripped the steering wheel with both hands, and kept my foot on the accelerator. I felt the impact as more of a sensation than a sound, a moment of resistance, like driving through deep water. My car shuddered, the windshield cracked with a sound like a gunshot, and then I was through, still accelerating, still moving. I opened my eyes. My windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks, but I could still see through it. The highway ahead was empty. In my mirrors, there was nothing. No wreckage, no pieces of the cars I'd apparently just driven through. Nothing. The radio finally went silent. I drove for another 20 minutes at high speed before I saw the lights of Austin ahead. It wasn't much of a town, a few buildings, a gas station, maybe 200 people total. But it looked like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I pulled into the gas station parking lot, shifted into park, and just sat there shaking. A sheriff's deputy was parked at the far end of the lot. He must have seen me pull in like a bat out of hell because he walked over, flashlight in hand, and tapped on my window. I rolled it down, and cold desert air flooded into my car. "You all right, son?" he asked.
He was older, maybe 60, with a weathered face of someone who'd spent their whole life in the desert. "You're driving pretty fast for a residential area." I started, then stopped. What was I supposed to say? That I'd been chased by driverless cars and figures standing in the middle of the highway? That my radio had spoken to me in my own voice? "I'm sorry, officer. I hit something on the highway and it cracked my windshield. I guess I panicked and just wanted to get here as fast as possible." He shined his flashlight at my windshield, examining the cracks. Then he walked around my car slowly, looking at the hood and bumper. When he came back to my window, his expression was strange, not suspicious exactly, but concerned in a way that made my stomach knot. "You didn't hit anything," he said, quietly. "What? But my windshield." "Your windshield cracked from the inside," he said. "See how the impact point is on the interior surface? That doesn't happen when you hit something. That happens when—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Where'd you come from?" "Reno. I've been driving Highway 15 for the last few hours." He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then he sighed. "You're not the first person to come tearing into Austin looking like they've seen a ghost."
Highway 50 does that to people sometimes, especially at night, especially when they're alone. What are you talking about? This is old desert, son. Been here long before people, will be here long after we're gone. And there are stretches of it, like 15 between here and Fallon, where the usual rules don't always apply. The Paiute people knew about it. They had names for certain places along that route, places they wouldn't go after dark, called them thin places, where our world and others kind of overlap. That's not, I started to say possible, but the word died in my throat. After what I experienced, how could I claim anything was impossible? Did you see things out there? The deputy asked. Things that shouldn't be there? I nodded slowly. Did they chase you? Another nod. But you made it here, so you did something right. Most people who see things out there, they panic and crash, or they stop when they shouldn't, or they listen when the road starts talking to them. He gestured at my windshield. This happened because whatever was out there tried to get inside your car. Tried hard, but it couldn't, so it just left its mark instead. What were they? What was chasing me? Honestly, son, I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know. All I can tell you is that you're safe now. Whatever's out there on the loneliest road, it stays out there. It doesn't come into the towns, doesn't cross the city limits. You'll be fine as long as you stay here tonight. I need to get to Salt Lake City, I said. I have a conference tomorrow. Then you wait until sunrise and you drive east during the day. Trust me on this. You don't want to get back on 50 until the sun's up. Get yourself a motel room at the Pony Express Lodge, get some rest, and leave at first light. That's my advice, and I strongly suggest you take it. I did take it. I checked into the motel, which was small and outdated but clean and blessedly normal. I tried to sleep but couldn't, kept seeing those figures standing in the highway, kept hearing my own voice chanting my name from the radio. Eventually I gave up and just sat in a chair by the window, watching the empty street outside and waiting for sunrise. As the sky started to lighten, I felt something release in my chest, a tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The deputy had been right. Whatever was out there couldn't touch me here, in this little town with its circle of streetlights and its handful of buildings.
I was safe. I left Austin at 6 in the morning, just as the sun was cresting the mountains to the east. Highway 50 looked completely different in daylight, just a regular 2-lane highway cutting through scenic desert landscape. No menacing darkness, no sense of presence, just road and sky and the kind of beauty that made you understand why people loved the desert. I drove straight through to Delta, Utah, where Highway 50 finally ends and merges with Highway 6. I stopped there for breakfast and to have my windshield examined by a mechanic. He confirmed what the deputy had said. The cracks originated from inside the car, which he said was damn strange, but not unheard of if there was a manufacturing defect. I didn't tell him what really happened. I made it to Salt Lake City in time for my conference. I gave my presentations, met with clients, did all the things I was supposed to do, but my heart wasn't in it. I kept thinking about Highway 50, about the loneliness that was more than just physical isolation, about things moving in the darkness that knew my name and wanted me to stay. I've driven across Nevada several times since then, but I've never taken Highway 50 again. I stick to Interstate 80, which adds time to the trip, but keeps me around other cars and towns and the normal flow of civilization. Some of my colleagues joke about me being afraid of the loneliest road, and I let them. It's easier than trying to explain the truth. The truth is that Highway 50 across Nevada isn't just lonely because there aren't many people. It's lonely because it wants to be lonely, because there are things out there in that vast emptiness that don't want human intrusion, that resent our highways cutting through their territory. And sometimes, when you're alone on that road at night, they come to remind you that you don't belong there, that you're an intruder in their domain. I talked to the gas station attendant in Fallon recently. I was passing through on my way to Tahoe and stopped to fuel up, and I recognized him from that day back in November. I asked him what he'd wanted to tell me when I was heading east on 50. He looked at me for a long time before answering. I wanted to tell you that people go missing on that stretch of road. Not a lot, but enough that those of us who live here notice. Every few years, someone drives east from Fallon at night and never makes it to Austin. The highway patrol finds their car eventually, usually run off the road or crashed, but they never find the driver. Just gone. Why didn't you warn me? Would you have listened? Most people don't. They think we're just superstitious desert rats telling ghost stories to scare tourists. So I stopped trying to warn people and just hope they make it through okay. I made it through, I said. Yeah, you did. But you're different now, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes. You're one of the ones who saw something out there and lived to tell about it. Question is, are you going to tell about it, or are you going to keep it to yourself? I didn't answer him then, but I'm answering now by writing this down. Because people need to know about Highway 50. Not just that it's the loneliest road in America, but why it's lonely. What lives in that loneliness? What happens when you drive through it alone at night? If you're planning to drive Highway 50 across Nevada, please listen to what I'm telling you. Drive during the day if you can. Don't stop unless you absolutely have to. If your radio starts acting strange, turn it off immediately. If you see other cars that don't make sense, don't try to interact with them. And if you see figures standing in the highway, don't slow down, don't stop, don't try to help them. Just drive. Keep your eyes on the road ahead and drive until you reach the next town. Because the loneliest road wants to keep you. It wants to add you to the collection of missing drivers, the ones who drove east from Fallon one night and never arrived at their destination. And if you let it, if you stop or slow down or engage with the things that move in that darkness, it will. I was lucky. I made it to Austin. But I left something out there on Highway 50, my sense that the world is a rational, explicable place, my belief that darkness is just the absence of light and nothing more, my confidence that when I'm driving alone on an empty highway, I'm really alone. Now I know better. Now I know that some roads are more than just pavement connecting 2 points. Some roads are borders, boundaries between our world and places we're not meant to go. And Highway 50, in the darkest hours of the night, is one of those roads. So drive carefully out there. Stay alert. And remember, the loneliest road is only lonely if you're the only living thing on it. Sometimes you're not.